Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy, and this week we have an awesome guest. It's back in the springtime of 2020, so looking forward to moving on in life. Hopefully you got your first quarter goals nailed down and you're just running, because first quarter goes away fast. I mean, I remember 2019 and it ended before it got started, I feel like, and that happens often in our lives. So remember to stay focused on your legacy and what are you doing daily to fuel that. Well, our guest today, his name is Todd Palmer. Todd Palmer is an executive coach, keynote speaker, renowned thought leader, and author, CEO. He's just done a ton of different things in his life. Something unique about him, if you're watching the video of this on YouTube, then you can see this. But if you're just listening on Facebook, or not Facebook, on a podcast, you can't see this. But he has a lot of baseball memorabilia. And I'll let him identify what a lot is. I know there's a level of, you don't want people coming down to your house and knowing what's inside your house. But he has a lot of it, like more items than most of the people listening to this have earned in their lifetime dollars. So a significant amount to say the least. And that's just a hobby, right? That has nothing to do with what he does for work, nothing to do with necessarily his businesses, but it's just a passion of his. And I think that's the reason I'm bringing that out is it's important to identify your passions and learn what passions are yours that you're doing just because you want to do them. And then what other things are you doing in your life? Because there's a lot of things that I do just because I love doing them. And so make a list of that for you and say, how often do I do these things that I do just because I love doing them? And are you allowing yourself to get that fulfillment daily or weekly or monthly? How often is that fulfillment coming in? So Todd, thank you so much for joining here on the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. We're excited to hear all of your crazy mindset coaching, helping us become better individuals, people, fathers, husbands, wives, daughters, sons, the whole bit, business owners. Go ahead and give us an introduction of who you are, where you came from, really what that transition looked like, or that gap from when you went from being kind of in something you thought was going to fulfill you, didn't quite hit the mark, and transitioning into something where you found more fulfillment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited about being able to talk about the importance of legacy, the importance of following something that's going to fulfill us. There's a big difference between the spike of happiness. We can have a piece of chocolate and feel pretty happy, but to create a life by design that has immense satisfaction by the time we're done here on Earth is a very important thing to me. So I grew, kind of a quick beat down and dirty about me. I grew up on a farm in mid-Michigan. I went to a very small high school. I had 42 kids in my graduating class. One of my first big life decisions was I had an opportunity to go play Division III basketball or go to the local community college on a talent scholarship for writing and journalism, because I thought I wanted to be a writer. I thought I was going to be a newspaper reporter, because I really had a passion at the time for writing. And the first flip for me was once I got to the college and they were actually essentially compensating me with my free tuition to write, I discovered I didn't like it as much anymore. It's like once it went from being a hobby and a passion and a academic pursuit to something I was actually like responsible and accountable for, there was a big shift. Upon graduating from college, I actually ended up teaching at a university for 3 years, and I really loved that work. The light bulb moments of the students, and to be able to work with someone to help them have those breakthroughs to understand was very important to me. Right around the same time, I'd gotten married, and I had a son. The marriage did not work out for a lot of reasons, which would probably make a great podcast for someone who has to deal with the joys and sorrows of divorce. And from that relationship, I had a son, and I had custody of my son. I started raising my son from when he was from the age of 2 years old, and I was 24. I was working in corporate America. I was doing sales. I was doing sales for products. I was doing sales for services like staffing and employee leasing. And I just realized for me that I couldn't live the life I wanted to as a single dad, going to school, getting my master's degree to continue to teach at night, as well as working during the day and wanting to be a good father. So I made one of the next big life decisions. I had to make a choice of what was my number one priority in life. And I decided for me, my number one priority was my son. Then the epiphany off of that was I couldn't be a good corporate employee for me, because I wanted to be there for all those once in a lifetime moments, from the first soccer game to the first field trip at school. And so I started the journey of trying to figure out what else I could do with my abilities and skills, recognizing that I couldn't be all things to all people all the time. Around that time, entrepreneurship was just starting to get a little bit of traction in the world. Entrepreneur Magazine was out, Inc. Magazine was out, and I was a voracious reader, reading all these stories about these people started and bootstrapped their companies. And I knew at a time another group of people who had started and bootstrapped their company. And they were doing what I thought was very well. They went very high very quickly, and then ended up crashing because they were selling on price, and they didn't build any margin into the business, and they went out. But they had a very 3 to 4 year run that was really, I thought, from the outsider's perspective, very impressive. And I thought, like maybe people who are listening today, I identified that, well, if they can do that, I can do that. So I wrote a business plan. Business plan was for $140,000 to start a temporary help company in Metro Detroit. Took the plan around to the banks, and crazily enough, the banks said to me, well, let's say you're a single father, you just came out of a divorce, you have a ton of debt, and we are not going to loan you any money at all. And that was very humbling, but I just kept talking to people and networking and having conversations about it. And I went and had lunch with an ex-boss of mine who had done well. And he said, well, no, I'm not going to give you $140,000 either. Well, here's what I will do. I'm going to challenge you to come back to me and tell me what the bare number you need is to start your company, because I want to invest in you, the company secondary. And that was hugely empowering to get that message from a trusted older advisor to say, I believe in you. The plan is secondary. So I came back, asked for $15,000, and I started my company. It's a company called Diversified Industrial Staffing, and we provided temporary help in Metro Detroit. And I went into that industry because I had worked in the industry in the past, so I knew how to do it. And I saw gaps in the marketplace that I thought I could fill. And by day 72, we were profitable. So I gave myself about a 90-day window. By day 72, we turned a corner, started hiring employees, started growing and scaling the business, but not really knowing what I needed to know. Flash forward 9 years later, we're having some highs and some lows in that time frame, but basically doing okay. 2006 arrives. By September of that year, I was $600,000 in debt. I was 2 months away from running out of all of my money, including losing the house that my son and I lived in. I was deeply depressed. I was suffering from massive imposter syndrome because I thought I had to be all things to all people all the time. I had a toxic and dysfunctional culture in my organization. I had employees that I didn't believe in. They obviously, based being on the poor performance of the company, I don't blame them. They didn't believe in me. And I hired a coach on a credit card, and we worked together. My mindset was awful. I was feeling very defeated by life. I was feeling very, my self-criticism, the itty-bitty negative committee in my head was meeting on a daily basis, telling me how awful I was doing. And I had a lot of mindset issues going through that. So we talked, we laid out a plan to turn around the company. And from that plan, I ended up having to make some difficult decisions because I had a breach of culture. I had a breach of trust within the organization. I didn't trust anyone who worked for me. So I walked in on September 9th of 2006, and I fired my entire company. So kind of to recap for the listener, I'm $600,000 in debt, 2 months away from running out of all my money, taking on the additional expense of a coach, and I fired everybody. Through a lot of work, through a lot of mindset shifting, such as every day I had to do 5 positive things because my mindset was so incredibly negative. And I had to report in every day to my coach. What did I do? Like day 3, I didn't report in. It's 5 o'clock, phone rings. Hey, so I didn't get your text. What'd you do today? Yeah, I didn't do anything. I didn't go in. And he read me the riot act. It's like, this is your business. You said you wanted to fix it. Don't waste my time. If you can't get out of bed by 9:05, you call me. That's my job. My job is to champion you through this. He goes, I told you if you work with me, we were going to turn this thing around. I told you you would not fail. I can only do that work if you work with me. You've got to communicate. And I chose not to. So I did 5 positive things before going to bed that night and resumed the process. Started hiring people. Came up with the process to hire for DNA, not for resume. I was always hiring staffing industry people in the past. And I recognized that I had to shift how I did everything in the business. The coach was teaching me, don't just focus on revenue. You've got to focus on the margin business. Just about that time, the recession kicks in. And we make the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies for the first of 6 times. So to go from being $600,000 in debt to making the Inc. 5000 6 times was not something I had ever in my wildest dreams think would happen. And fast forward, we pay off all the debt. We find the inflection point in the marketplace where we have an increased demand and a diminished supply of people. We fill that gap in the center. In that filling of that gap, we're able to charge more to the customer for what we're doing, get paid faster, which pays off the debt quicker. And boom, there we go. We make the Inc. 5000, and it's something that it's just an incredible job. I had such a great team working with me at the time. People were all focused, going in the right direction. We were doing the 90-day plans. We were doing the annual planning. But about 5-6 years ago, it dawned on me, just because I could do something well didn't mean I had a true love and a passion for the work. And it's funny. It was kind of like the emperor has no clothes syndrome. My whole staff knew it before I admitted it to myself. And I put together a plan to exit the business. And now, 2 years ago, I started Extraordinary Advisors, where I go around the globe telling people the story I just told your audience, and talking about how we have to work on our mindset first. To grow your organization, to grow your business, you have to grow yourself as a leader first. And now I've been fortunate. I've spoke in Toronto. I've spoken in South Africa. I've spoken in Monterrey, Mexico. I've spoken all around the United States, telling these stories about how entrepreneurs, there's a process to shift your mindset. There's a process to create a life by design. And I just completed a 1-year engagement with a client, for example, who said, in the first year I've worked with Todd, my revenues have grown 70%. My profits have grown by a factor of 5x. So 500% growth on profits is not a bad thing. And he concludes the testimonial video by saying, and I love my life and I love my job. That's now become my purpose and my passion in life. And it takes me back 30 years ago when I was teaching at the university, and the light bulb moments the students would have. When I'm on stage and someone has a light bulb moment by something I've shared with them, it's soul fulfilling. When a client sends something to me and they lean into those uncomfortable moments of, I don't know if my business is going to make it, and they plug into my confidence in them, and then they turn the business around. They do the work. I just provide them some guidance. It's so incredibly rewarding that I don't ever see myself retiring from coaching and speaking.
I love that. It's so cool. I'm excited to dive into a lot of these notes, but I think that is that's the journey of life, and we all are going to face aspects of this journey. And the question is, are we conscious of the journey, or are we just allowing the journey to happen without any consciousness of what's happening? And one of the things you said, I might actually work backwards here of like all the things that I loved about this. But
go for it.
There was a time. So have you heard of Steve Siebold? I
have not.
Okay. So Steve Siebold, he has a book called The 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. And if I remember correctly, his company actually had the contract with the Navy SEALs to do all the mental toughness coaching for them. Like he was the one who mentality coached the Navy SEALs. So for like 20 years, his company had that contract. But one of the things that in this book, he has like his thoughts basically his thoughts on one of these 177 mental toughness secrets. And then he has an action step. One of the action steps is to go and ask 5 people who are closest to you, basically what they see are your greatest gifts, and why what are the top 5 reasons that you are guaranteed to succeed as an individual?
I love that. That's a great exercise. I've written this down. I will have this on my phone by the end of the day.
Yeah, it's awesome. Anyways, I was just thinking, how often are we walking around our lives? We think we're good at something, we're succeeding, whatever, and the other people around us, either they're too scared to tell us because we're in a position of authority over them, or they just simply like they don't want to derail us. They don't want to dissuade us from what we're doing. But really, like everybody around you can recognize that you're not in your passion and you have these very unique skills that if you just use those skills to serve more people, you'd be happier because that's what really like they can see that that's what lights your heart on fire. They don't have to like be told it. They can see that when you're performing a few simple activities, that's what really gets you going. Everything else is the mundane stuff that you don't enjoy, but when you do those few activities, but we don't accept it ourselves because like you said, we want to be the everything man.
Well, I think it's important too that going back to the people you surround yourself with. I'm part of a group called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. I've got a forum that I've been on the same forum for 17 years. And when I told my forum mates that I was thinking of leaving the recruiting business and starting the coaching and advising business, they were all for it because they said, you're the best coach on our table. You've given us the most knowledge and give back and learning. And ultimately what we did an exercise so similar. Like, again, I got to get the Siebel book where we took a look at how did we define success in our 20s and 30s? And it was typically, and which is nothing wrong with this. And listen, I'm a capitalist first and foremost. I don't think anybody should work for free. But the piece became like we used to define success as money, houses, wealth of a financial perspective. That was the definition of success. And then I saw a quote from Tony Robbins, and it shifted everything for me. So now my version of success, to tie into your point, is success is doing what I want, where I want, with whom I want to do it with, as often as I want to go do it. So if I'm, I've been working a lot with some students, and I've got a student that I worked with. He's signing his national letter of intent on Monday for baseball. He's going to go. He's got a 4-year guaranteed ride to get his education paid for. And I've worked with him on mindset. And baseball is he's a pitcher, and it's a very complicated sport for him to get his athletic abilities off the charts. Is getting his mindset caught up with that. And I've worked with him as a favor to his dad for free. That is such a rewarding thing because I'm doing what I want. I'm helping this young man who I really think is a great kid, and he just needs some guidance. Where I want, we typically go have lunch, and I'm happy to pay for it. When I want, whatever, and it's helping him at 17 create a life by design. And if he never makes pro ball, that's okay. But he's getting his education paid for. He's going to learn so much in this process, and that work for me just fills me up. So whether it's a 16, 17-year-old kid or it's a 50-year-old CEO, that's success for me, but it's so different than what I thought was in my 20s and 30s what success was going to turn out to be.
Yeah, and it's something that, as you mentioned, other people saw in you before you were willing to accept
Exactly.
And that's why it's so important to surround yourself. For me, I want to surround myself with people. And it's funny because one of my core values is candidness or candor, rather. Mm-hmm. And it's important for me to surround myself with people who are willing to just tell me bluntly what they think about me, good or bad, because it doesn't really affect me that much as far as like what somebody thinks. But if nobody's willing to tell me that they think I'm wrong or that they think I should be doing something different, then I'm screwed ultimately because I naturally have a confident voice. I naturally come across as like, this is fact. It served me very well to have that gait and tone in my verbiage in my business. As a leader, it serves you, but it also, if you don't have other strong people around you that can hold you back, because then everybody just lockstep follows you rather than saying, no, we need to do something different. You're better in this other area. Let me do that. You go do what you're better at. And so I love that aspect of just finding people who are willing to recognize in you your giftedness, and encourage you to chase that sooner in your life.
I think that's a really excellent point. I was just with a leadership team the other day, 10 leaders in the room, and the CEO had been really the alpha in the room and was not letting his team do their jobs because he was just overpowering. So we created a process where we went around the room to lay out the quarterly plan. And I had the leader promise that he would speak last, so he could hear and solicit the best ideas. I said, you've got a brilliant team, you're paying them a lot of money, and you're holding them back, and you don't even realize it. And we had a real deep dive. He goes, well, I want their ideas. I said, then you have to speak last. Because the power of the room will drive the organization much stronger. The power of 10 versus the power of one. So we spent a lot of time. So 3 or 4 people go around the room. CEO chimes in. I'm like, stop it. Finally, I said, and I explained to everybody up front that he was supposed to speak last. So then it became a running joke. What it did is it took a lot of the governors off of the other leaders in the room. The chief marketing officer had some brilliant ideas. The CEO had never heard them because he thought he had the best ideas. Change the dynamic. The business, I think, is going to just take off like the hockey stick of growth, because the leader was able to subordinate his natural instinct to dominate the room, because he's usually the smartest one in the room. He got the power of everybody going for it because he agreed to speak last. And by the end of it, he was so thankful. He's like, oh my gosh, this is the best meeting we've ever had. People feel buoyant. They feel encouraged. They feel empowered. And he goes, basically, all I did was say yes to other ideas. He goes, because honestly, most of them were better than my ideas. Such a great opportunity for him to get that feedback from the room, that he could have a better organization with the power and the leadership of a bunch of people, not just having to rely on himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I just know for myself, from a perspective of being the leader, I'm aware that I'm just pulling stuff out of my butt most of the time. Like, yeah, let's do this. And I just say it confidently, and people are like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And it's like, no, if that's not what we should be doing, tell me. But because nobody's offering any advice, so we just do it, and we either fail forward or we launch forward. But it's just a fascinating aspect of humanity where we have to balance that. And as a leader, if you're leading in your family, in your faith, and in your fitness, wherever you're leading currently, be aware that there's people who have ideas. There's people who have thoughts that are probably not being expressed because of, and I hate to use the word fear, but it is a little bit of fear of rejection at the very best. And at the very worst, their fear of losing their job or something a lot worse than that.
I would say that there's an additional pink elephant in the room. It's that fear of criticism, that fear of being shut down. I mean, think about it from a small child's perspective. If the parent is constantly dumping on them, your ideas are terrible. Kids are naturally born with massive curiosity, and often the parents will crush that within the child, not even knowing it, thinking safety first, good social protocols, good social behaviors. Then we do that as leaders with our teams because we essentially have the final say. So we can. It's such an art to be able to let your team know that there is. You're free to share ideas. You're free to disagree, and there will be. And you don't have to worry about the fear of reprisal or the fear of being terminated, because ultimately we do control whether they stay or they go. The flip side, in today's economy, where there are 600,000 more manufacturing jobs, for example, than there are people to fill them, it really is a candidate market. So I'm trying to get employers to recognize, like, the number one reason someone leaves a company isn't money, isn't hours, it's you. It's the leader. The number one source of your next great employee are your current employees. So if you're a good leader, you buying in, and people are going to tell their friends, hey, I work at this place, come work with us. So the leader can shift so much by allowing that creative tension in the room to allow others to be able to express themselves, especially with millennials. God, I have to tell people this constantly. Millennials are part of their mindset, and part of how they were raised is they like to be part of a team. They need to be heard, but they realize that you ultimately have the final say, but they want their voice in the room. They want their voice on a decision. They recognize that someone else is going to ultimately have that decision, but they want to be heard. And they're willing to trade money for freedom and flexibility. So don't demand that millennial is the first one in, last one out like they did in my generation. It doesn't work that way anymore. So I think there's a lot of different things that you're talking about today that can have wide cross appeal, ultimately for the leader to have a more enjoyable life by design. But the greatest thing the leader can do is build other leaders by teaching them they're part of a company by design. They're able to create titles by design. They're able to do a lot of different things under the surface so that they are enjoying the work they do. Because if they don't enjoy working for you, they're going to want to go someplace where they do enjoy the work and the people they work with.
Yep, 100%, 100%. So moving back even farther into your story, because there's a few things that, again, these are key things because there's so many people who are discounting their skills, they're discounting their passions, they're discounting what they're good at for a multiple of reasons. But in your story, I want to highlight just a few of them. One of them is that we have this opinion that a hobby and a passion, if we're being compensated for it, then it's no longer fun. Like, I don't understand that, honestly. Like, why is it that, like, what do you think is happening in somebody's mind that as soon they enjoy something, as soon as they're being compensated for it, they're like, yeah, this isn't worth getting paid for. I still love it, but it's not worth getting paid for. Like, why is it that when we have a demand on us and we have an expectation put on our hobby and passion, it's no longer fun?
Well, I think part of it goes into, I think our brains need to have a certain place to go to relax. Hobbies are often those places. So as you mentioned earlier that, I have a large sports memorabilia collection, which I do. I've been asked multiple times, do I want to get into the sports memorabilia business? And I really don't. I love the hobby. I have a passion and a skill set for growing leaders, which has nothing to do with my hobby. So I think we, as multi-dimensional creatures on the earth, we can have lots of different hobbies, but I think we also have to figure out what is our zone of genius. My zone of genius is not autographs. My zone of genius is not baseball. I happen to enjoy it, but I think my zone of uniqueness is growing and helping leaders through my experiences and through some best practices to grow themselves and to grow their business. I enjoyed writing, but when I felt like when I had the freedoms of creativity removed, and I used to create my own stories at the high school newspaper. At the college newspaper, I was assigned stories, and I just wasn't interested in them. I remember going back to even being a student, I did really well in the classes I was really interested in. The classes I just needed to get through to get out of school, I did the barest of minimum. So that's how my brain worked.
No, I love that, because I think that there's a recognition there that maybe not everybody's conscious of, and that is that you can be good at a lot of things, you can love doing a lot of things, but ultimately that for me, it's almost like a sense of duty, I feel like, because you said your zone of genius, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you have a zone of genius that really isn't the thing that you receive the most fulfillment from.
Right.
But you recognize that this is a gift that you've been given really with the purpose to share it with the world. And so it's almost like a duty to share that gift with the world and fully express that while still having other areas. And then you grow to have fun doing your zone of genius.
I think there's some truth in that. It's interesting. So we're talking about athletes before we got on the broadcast. In Detroit, we've got Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, both excellent football players. What they talk about now that they both retired really early, they had many years left in their bodies to give to the game. They're saying, yeah, I enjoyed playing the game. I had an ability and a skill set that compensated me well, but I never loved playing the game. And I don't like being defined as just a football player. I want to do more with myself. Where you get other guys who, so I still play competitive baseball around the country. I play in Michigan, I play in Florida, I play in Phoenix. And there are guys who love the game, who are passionate about the game and do not have any ability to play the game. They just have no ability, and they don't have that gift. I think we all have gifts, and I think part of it is to figure out what our gift is. I've got friends who are excellent guitar players, and then I know people who are excellent musicians. There is a gap in their skill set. There's a gap in what the marketplace will pay them for. And it's getting to understand there's nothing wrong to recognize, and that self-awareness comes into play. Hey, I love to play the guitar. And if someone wants to pay me to play 12 hours a day, I'd be happy to. The reality is, nobody wants to pay me 12 hours a day to play the guitar. Where this other guy he's a virtuoso. Now, if you have a virtuoso with a passion for the hobby, a passion for the guitar, passion for business. I mean, I know serial entrepreneurs. Richard Branson owns 50, 60 companies. He loves owning businesses. What he doesn't love is he doesn't love operating the business. So again, it's that, where's your zone of genius? Where's your unique contribution to the earth? And if you have a skill that you really love, but nobody really wants to pay you for it, you might want to recognize that's a great hobby and a great passion, but it's not something that you're going to be able to feed your family on.
Yeah, no. So now we're gonna go one step further here because I love where this is going. First off, for you who are listening, think about what is your zone of genius, what is your giftedness, what is your one thing that really that's what you feel you're meant to bring to this earth and to share with other people. Because I believe everything, at least for me, I try and structure my life around service, love, and contribution. Like those things are high on my list of what I want to be doing with my life, or activities where I feel like I can fulfill that. But here's the next thing that I want, the next limiting belief. I find them limiting beliefs when I'm talking with coaches, when I'm talking with different people. You were a teacher at college and you liked being a teacher. You liked seeing the light bulb go off. I love that. I was one of my highest, well, it was funny because I was at a retreat a few months back and they asked us to write down a list of stuff that fulfills us. So I'm going to read a few things that fulfill me. And it was funny because if we contrast this list with my wife's list, I'm doing things that fulfill me almost
Okay.
every day. At least everything on this list happens once a month, if not more often. And on her list, it's like her list of stuff that fulfills her is smaller, and it also is not happening as often. It's
Okay.
interesting. But
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
some of the things that really I love doing is leading other people to Christ, seeing confidence come in somebody's eyes, personal development, business development, striving for excellence, seeing other people love, creating transformation in people, and having just conversations with random people. So I
Love it.
love all of these things that I'm doing, but I used to think, well, I can't get paid for doing those things, right? And most teachers in America, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, most teachers, they just don't get paid very well. Okay. And I'm putting this in air quotes if you're watching this because this is huge. People think that their skill set, maybe they like playing the guitar 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and so they think, oh, nobody's going to pay me for it. And I would at least challenge it. Now, I'm not saying you have to go this route, but guess what? In my opinion, Todd is doing nothing more now than he was back then. He's still teaching people. The question is, where are you trying to employ your giftedness or your talent or your passion?
Agreed.
What's the venue that you're trying to do it? I have clients who are teachers and they teach at a high school or a grade school and they get paid $30,000-$40,000 a year. I mean, it's just like not very much. Then I have clients who are teaching the same exact content, but they're doing it in an online forum and they're teaching more students at once, getting paid $100,000+ a year. And the
Right.
difference is, where are you employing your skill? So maybe it's dancing, maybe it's being a chef. I had a guest on my podcast a while back who's a chef who rose in the ranks in the hospital and what's the word, hotel industry, wasn't getting paid what he wanted to get paid, stepped out of that, became just a consultant chef who would come in to an organization and reorganize the chef world in that organization, the food world, cafeteria area, whatever, restaurant, and then he would move. So he was now a consultant chef rather than a salaried chef, and 10 times his income, right? So it's these smaller things, is where are you actually choosing to employ your giftedness rather than, oh, I can't make money at this, I got to go find something else. No,
It,
find out where you can employ it that's really going to give you the return that fits with your lifestyle.
right. One of my favorite speakers in the last 10 years is a guy named David Rendell, and he has a book called The Freak Factor. And his whole themology is we often don't recognize the things that we get criticism for are really our unique ability. And his tagline is, what's weird makes you wonderful. And he talks about, he's 6'7", so he's tall wherever he goes. He can't hide himself, right? And people think, wow, there's a lot of advantages to being tall. And then he talks about the disadvantages of being tall. And part of his speech moves into talking about how he was guided by his at his high school and college, or his high school and his elementary school. And he goes, I was told I talk too much, I have too many opinions, and I can't sit still as a kid. So those became my limiting beliefs. Now, as an adult, I get paid to talk, I get paid to move around, and I get paid to share opinions, and I make a great living. So that when I saw him, he blew my mind, because I'm like, oh my gosh, the reinforcement we get is the things that we do are wrong, are bad. Parents, teachers, things like that. What Dave was so wise to figure out is what's weird makes you wonderful. So if you're someone like you're talking about who has skills and abilities, your challenge as an entrepreneur, or your challenge as even a solo practitioner, is to figure out where can I apply my zone of genius, my unique abilities, which maybe other people told me 15, 20, 30 years ago were weaknesses, which are actually strengths, and how do I apply them in a way that I'm earning the type of living that I want to earn. But the other part of it is I found for what you're talking about is you have to be able to demonstrate a very clear return on investment for the buyer. You have to, I tell my clients, whatever you spend with me, you should expect to get 4 to 6 times return on investment. So like the client who just reported that they've grown their revenue by 70% and their profits by a factor of 5x, they're thrilled at getting 500% return on their investment with me. But it's the work that they've done. And so much of the work I've done with them is just like what you're talking about, is getting them to figure out, what do they do well? What do they do that nobody else in the world can do? How do they charge more for that, but still keep it cost effective for the marketplace? And then how do they do that over and over and over and over again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where hiring a coach can really add a lot of value into it. And so how many, because again, these are the common things that I come up against and people are asking me, but how many people do you think who have gotten to your position, right? Who've reached I'm going to call it success, not just financial success, but overall in general, fulfilling their passion. How many of those people do you think started their businesses, they're getting the help they needed through some form of debt, whether that's credit cards, business loans, personal loans?
So I'm going to take your
investing. I don't know.
I'm going to take your debt even a step further, and I'll get back to the money part. But I think I had an internal self-esteem debt. I had to prove to the world I could do this. I had to prove I was chasing a ghost. I have a client who recently shared with me that, we finally broke him down to get him say, so why are you still so unhappy? I just wanted to prove, I wanted to prove to my dad that I'm a success. I said, awesome. Let's set up a call with your dad and we can talk about it. Because my dad's been gone for 15 years. Like, wow. So he's now dealing with the ghost. So we have an internal debt. And what we fail to realize, I think most entrepreneurs are often self-reliant and we're rugged individualists. I know I was, and it's very clear in my arc of knowledge that I needed coaching all along the way. And I had coaching. And when I didn't have coaching is when I went down, because I wasn't mature enough or savvy enough to have that outside person giving me that perspective that I greatly needed. My father passed away when I was 5 years old, and my older brother lived across the country, so we didn't interact all the time. And I'm isolating. I'm thinking I've got this down, and I'm from the generation where we don't talk about our problems. Anybody listening, talk about your problems. There's a community of people out there that will listen. So I created my own debt. So it's almost as if when you talk about the debt question, so I think we have an internal debt. We have an external debt we give to others. So if you've never seen anybody who's had battles with drugs and alcohol, they have to hit what they call bottom in order to get help. And the first step is to ask for help. My journey was no different. Now, my battle was with debt and bad decisions and self-esteem, where other people deal with drugs and alcohol. But if you take a look at the behavior patterns of both categories, they're very eerily similar. Entrepreneurs just focus their issues on growing a business, but their destructive behaviors with family and time and money are very classically similar. So I think to your question, we all have challenges. We all, for me, I can't work with a client until they're ready to change. My coach couldn't work with me until I was ready to change. He asked me a lot of, are you ready to change? Have you had enough of this kind of questions, which I thought was brilliant. I do that now. And the great thing about it is I've recognized and realized that I part of my issues in life is I'm never satisfied, which makes me a lifelong learner. So I still have a coach in my life today. He's not a business coach. He's a neuroscientist, and he teaches me how my brain works. So I can stop doing the things that really drive me crazy and drive others crazy. So I can do more of the things I enjoy and making others, making the world a better place. So I think the savvy person, the savvy entrepreneur recognizes that coaching is always needed. If you take a look at sports, Tiger Woods has a swing coach. Mike Trout has a hitting coach. Nolan Ryan had a pitching coach. In sports, it's encouraged that coaching is always going to be a part of your life. So you never take it out. But we go to university, we go to school, and I go, oh, thank goodness, I'm done learning. I'm done having teachers. I'm a big believer that we always have to have either peer-to-peer learning, like in an EO, coaching, like the services I provide, or maybe you provide, that close, tight network of mastermind groups. Coaching is part of it. They say it takes a community to raise a child. I argue it takes a community to raise an entrepreneur too.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. So, you got a little bit into this, but I would love for you to share even more in detail. How is what are the parallels between entrepreneurial mindset and the 12-step recovery program?
That's no one's ever really asked me that. And I certainly want to preface it by saying I'm not a licensed counselor. I have personally never been through a 12-step program. But I have clients that have. I have people intimately in my life who have. So I'm going to kind of do my best to answer the question, but I want to make sure that people don't call me, reach me out on my website. Hey, I need help with drugs and alcohol. That's not my area of expertise. So if you take a look at the entrepreneurial mindset as well as the mindset of someone who's got a substance challenge, typically there's a I'm not good enough mindset attached. So they take the drugs and the alcohol to numb the feelings, numb the pain, and it create a different version of themselves. A lot of entrepreneurs start a business to prove something to themselves because they feel deficient. They feel deficient either internally or they feel deficient in the messages they received from childhood and how they behave. Then those deficiencies then create behaviors. Those behaviors then exhibit themselves in some things that worked well. So, hey, when I was in college, I'd go out and drink and I had a great time. When I'm in my 40s, I go out and drink and I feel like I'm going to die and I'm really mean to people. Mm-hmm. So a behavior maybe worked for them at one point socially, but then it became too much and it didn't work for them socially. Same with entrepreneurship. I'm a rugged individualist. I've grown my business. I'm self-reliant. I've taken it from 300,000 to 900,000. And I've reached a ceiling of complexity. Well, I'm just going to keep doing the same things I did at 300,000 at 900,000. It doesn't work. The business is different. Maybe you were building yourself a job. Now you're building yourself a company. And I've had clients say to me, I want to be on the Inc. 5000 6 times like you were. I said, that's a great goal, but that wasn't why I did what I did. And getting to understand why they do what they do. And a lot of times, why entrepreneurs do what they do is to feed something and to fill something within inside of themselves. Just like the addict is wanting to feed and fill something within inside of themselves. So part of it is to recognize those both categories have fear and self-doubt. And often that self-doubt turns into self-loathing, mm-hmm. depending on where they are in the journey. And a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from imposter syndrome. I did. You walk into a room of other entrepreneurs and other successful people deemed by society, and you feel like, why I'm not worthy. I don't belong here. I don't want to be a part of a club that would have me in it. People with drug and alcoholic dependencies feel like I'm not worthy. I'm letting my family down. They don't know. They think they're hiding it. It's like I thought I was hiding some of my things. There are a lot of the traits and the behaviors are exhibited. The underlying algorithm for techies, the underlying algorithm is the same. They're just exhibited differently. So I always tell people like this, that I had to hit bottom in order to change. People say, well, I want you to come in and change my company and change my leadership team. I can't do that. I have to work with the leader and the entrepreneur. They have to work on changing themselves and how they approach their team, how they approach their business, and how they contribute to it. No different than the drug addict or the alcoholic who says, yeah, it's my family that screwed up. I'm fine.
Yep. No, exactly. With my clients, when I work with them on a financial basis, they're like, I just want to talk about money. I'm like, I'm not talking about money like almost ever. 95% of what I do with my clients has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? What are your core values? How do you receive fulfillment? Once we identify some of these base foundational principles, then then all the confusion about the money concept, where you're putting your money, I've had a few clients now where you sit down with them and they just are unaware of where their money's going. You ask them, okay, well, let's track this penny by penny. And it turns out they're spending hundreds of dollars on fast food, snacks, drinks, whatever. One of my clients over $1,000 on fast food eating out.
Wow.
It's like, I have no problem. Like whatever you feel fulfills you, do it, right? I'm not here to tell you whether it's good or bad. but I am going to challenge you and ask you, is it serving your legacy? Is it serving
Right.
your core values? And does it really give you fulfillment? If the answer is none of those, then what are we doing? And then we allow
Yeah.
them to choose how they want to continue moving forward. But all of that has to start with, again, who you are, what's your mindset, all these things, and has nothing to do with the actual manifestation of the activities, the money spending habits. It has to do with the indecision about who you want to become and what you want to lead.
I think that's brilliant. I love the fulfillment question because so many entrepreneurs say, I just want to be happy. I used to say, I just want to be happy. It's, part of the generation, go to school, get married, start a family, get a great career, and just be happy was kind of that was how my family believed. And that was the drilled into me. Talking to my current coach, and I was very frustrated one day. And he's like, so here, I have a prescription for happiness. Eat chocolate and then go to the gym because the spike of dopamine is the only way you're going to be happy. And he told me the story about how they did it with lab rats and how they just spiked them with dopamine and it made them absolutely insane. He goes, and he challenged me. It's become a platform for what I do now. Swap out happiness for satisfaction because satisfaction is a journey. Satisfaction is the hero's journey. And when you look at your legacy, when you look back on your life, the only thing we take with us are our memories. We can have all the money in the world, but we can't cheat death. It's not going to buy us out of it. Didn't work for Steve Jobs. It's not going to work for me. Mm-hmm. But what is our satisfaction? And if you take a look at the baby steps through the start of something to the end of the journey of a satisfying experience, there are highs and lows. It is the hero's journey, where if we're just focused on just being happy all the time, we're going to live a massive sense of disappointment. And if our only measure of having a successful life is cash is a byproduct of other activities. So I think your question of fulfillment is spot on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think so too. That's why I ask it. But I just have loved having you on having you as a guest on the podcast. If we wanted to connect with you, reach out and look for maybe coaching or a conversation, where's the best place to connect with you? Is it on social media, website? Where's the best place to get a hold of you?
The best place to get a hold of me is actually on my website. And I love the whole theme of the show of legacy because I'm really in a legacy play in my life. Most entrepreneurs, I think, start their business, like we've talked about for a while, to satisfy something within inside of themselves, to prove to something or to someone or someone else that they can do something. For me, being an extraordinary advisor is my legacy. I've written one book, I guess I'll live on Amazon forever. But the legacy for me is having enriching conversations like we've had this morning. So I love anybody who wants to connect with me on my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. I'm happy to give you a half hour of my time for free, no cost, to have an enriching conversation that's important to you. My goal is to listen, to absorb, and then I'll respond so I can be of great service to you. And it's my opportunity. People say, well, I don't want to bother you. No, it's an opportunity for me to do what I love. It's an opportunity for me to connect with people, have enriching conversations. And it allows me, in part of my legacy thought process, is to pay back all the great coaches and teachers I've had along my journey. A lot of them who never know the impact they've made on me. So please, anybody's interested, they got value out of our conversation today, please reach out at extraordinaryadvisors.com and I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of mine.
I love that. Okay, so really quick a story time for me. So I was listening to another podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire by John Lee Dumas. He does that podcast. And 2017, end of 2017, I was working my butt off 40, 50 hours a week, trying to make my business work, struggling, and listening to this podcast. And another coach, she lived up in Canada, offered a 30-minute coaching call for free. And I was just at the right moment where I was struggling enough that I was willing to call. I had set my ego down. I'm telling you guys this story so you can do the same, right? I set my ego down and I got on the phone call. It was December 23rd, a few days before Christmas. And I'm on this coaching call with her. And in a half an hour, we got to the bottom of that. I flat out did not believe I was worthy of success. I didn't believe I was worthy of being a father. And I'm not saying that this is going to be your story, but this was my story and what a half an hour can do for you. My monthly income from 2017 to 2018 quadrupled.
Wow.
4x my income by simply, once I recognized this is simply a worthiness issue, I put I am worthy in multiple contexts into my daily affirmations, and 4 times my income. a half an hour of Todd's time, I promise you, is worth it. You're going to get more specific questions answered. I promise you it's worth it. Don't miss out on that. And I can't express that enough, because it was a half an hour coaching call that completely changed the trajectory of my life.
That's awesome. What a great experience, Cher. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I love it. So please reach out to him. I'm grateful that I've had an hour of his time, and you can go back and re-listen to this podcast, but really, really think about that and what it means for you and what it could mean for you moving forward if you just got on a call and were to identify one thing, one belief that you have that's not serving you. What could that do for your life? And not about you and your income, because it's not about me and my income. It's about my wife and my kids and how I'm providing for them and how I'm able to now go back and serve more to help more people because I'm now financially stable. So take the half hour. It's worth it every second of the day. Okay. And the link will be in the show notes here. You can just click the link to his website and go. I'm assuming go get registered on your website for that half hour.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get it set up.
Awesome. So here are the last two sections of the podcast. We got about 3 minutes left. So this is called Legacy on Rapid Fire. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions and looking for 1 word to 1 sentence answers. If you use 1 word for the first question, I'm going to ask you to clarify. Okay?
Fair enough.
So what do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
I think the thing holding me back right now is a lack of awareness in the marketplace of what I'm able to deliver.
I love that. Okay. And what is the hardest thing you've ever accomplished in your life?
Oh my gosh. I think the hardest thing personally, and I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast, is the 3-year custody battle that I fought by myself as a attorney in pro per to get custody of my son is by far my life's biggest accomplishment.
That's cool. So that's what was going to be the next question is, what's your greatest success at this point in your life?
Getting custody of my son, raising a great young man. He's a 28-year-old accountant now from a personal perspective. And I think my greatest business success isn't being on the Inc. 5000 6 times. It's honoring my commitments to others and paying that $600,000 in debt.
Yeah. See, that's so cool. It comes back to what are the values, what are the core things, and about an individual and integrity. And that's the great success, is when you're getting the satisfaction and fulfillment of keeping your word. It's not what you build. It's about who have you as an individual become. It's these small distinctions, I promise you, that are separating the people who are leading the world from the people who are following in the world, is the small distinctions of how they identify themselves and their inner values and who they've chosen to be. So next question is, what is one of your secrets do you believe contributes most to your success?
I think really one of my biggest secrets is getting rid of the word expectation and replacing it with the word intention.
Fantastic. And what are 2 or 3 books that you would recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
Okay. So for me, I'll give you a couple. I mentioned one earlier, Freak Factor from David Rendell. It really helps you figure out who your uniqueness is to the world. And it may not be what you think, which I was really blown away by. One of the most pivotal books that I ever read for just pure business was Good to Great by Jim Collins, and the stories in there. I use his Stockdale Paradox story when I speak to audiences. And the last one, now I've listened to this book now almost 5 times on Audible. I've known it for less than 2 years. It's called The Book. The book is, in fact, I've got it right here. It's the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Blank by Mark Manson. And what I like about that book is it really helps reframe your mindset around every aspect of life. He talks about dating, he talks about kids, he talks about himself, he talks about business, and always driving, like your show's talking about today, is what legacy do you want to have? How do you want to show up in the world, and how do you want to be seen? And how is it that you can be exactly who you want to be and be okay with yourself at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, maybe I'll get that book for my wife.
It's powerful.
Okay.
We did a mastermind leadership retreat just based around that book.
That's awesome.
And it's giving yourself that it's for such a permission. And while it's got a lot of blue language in it, I find his humor to be incredibly funny. So it takes a lot to offend me. But I like he tells us the story of the band Metallica, and how their original guitarist, Dave Mustaine, who then went on to find a very successful hard rock band, was still very jealous of not being in Metallica anymore. And he compared that, he created a band called Megadeth. Then he went and talked about Pete Best, who was the Beatles drummer before Ringo Starr, and how they threw him out of the band before their first album, and how he had gone through a journey and how he had made peace with that choice, and how he was now living his life and didn't have jealousy for the four Beatles. He goes, and it kind of came out, he goes, I have enough money to live my life comfortably. I can walk down the street. Paul McCartney can't.
Yeah, it's so true. Like looking at the freedom of like what you actually have.
Where Dave Mustaine was complaining about, I could have been, I could have been in the biggest band in the world, and you threw me out, and you didn't let me do this, and you didn't, he had an alcohol issue. And he started Megadeth, which has sold 20, 30 million albums. It's not like nobody's ever heard of him, but he still had that weird jealousy and issues with something where Pete Best is like, life is good.
Yeah, that's funny. It's perception, man. Everything's perception. Okay, here's my favorite question. So I save it for last. I love it when it's a surprise for people on this show. But we're going to pretend that you're dead now. Okay. And you are able to come back in whatever form you believe in, right? And view your great grandchildren sitting around a table discussing your life. So this is 6 generations, about 200 years from now, okay, discussing your legacy and your life, Todd. I want to know, what do you want your great grandchildren to be saying about your legacy and your life and what you brought to the earth?
I would want them to say that he was a lifelong learner who, through trials and tribulations, discovered his authenticity, his transparency, and was able to demonstrate his vulnerability to be at the service of others.
Awesome. And if you've been listening to this podcast, which hopefully you didn't just skip to the end, but I think that is in absolute alignment with who Todd is. It took him a while sometimes to get there throughout his life to really identify that. But as soon as he has identified it, he's been living that, and he's helping other people live the same. So that is, I love that when it's in alignment. Sometimes people answer that and it's not in alignment with the whole podcast. It's like, okay, well, you got some work to do then.
Absolutely. It's so important. It's human beings, I've discovered you can be a great speaker and not connect with your audience because parts of them don't believe that your behaviors, your energies, and your message are out of alignment with how you come across. So I may not be the world's greatest speaker, but I want people to feel that they're getting the real deal, and people are like my clients are getting a real experience versus just a bunch of catchphrases and a bunch of polish and a bunch of sometimes even shock value. Like I was literally $600,000 in debt. I literally fired all of my employees. I was literally a single parent who fought for custody for 3 years, and I'm doing more than just fine.
Yeah, exactly. And you're and even financially, that's one area, but like you're really happy, satisfied, fulfilled, and you can see that. You can see when somebody's completely relaxed and zero stress in their life.
Sure.
External. I mean, we always have a level of stress we put on ourselves so we can continue to produce and excel and grow, which is kind of the lifelong learner thing. We're conscious that we don't know everything yet, which is a good thing. But it's not like we're feeling depressed or anxious about the future because that's taken care of. Now it's just pure creation mode. So I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And definitely, again, go check out his website. Take advantage of the free 30-minute. I hate to say free. I just hate the word free because people don't value it as much. This is life-changing. And if it could quadruple your income, if it could double your income, if it could help you sleep an extra hour at night because you have a little bit more peace in your life, what is that worth to you? It's not free because the cost of not doing it is all of that time, all that pain that you are in not knowing.
Right. Well, very well said, sir. Very well said.
Okay. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. I'm super grateful for you, Todd.
Thank you so much for having me today. I had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thank Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.